President Tinubu directs Finance Minister to submit new minimum wage plan in 48 hours. Central Bank of Nigeria denies allegations of plans to revoke licenses of 3 additional banks. Egyptians struggle with first bread subsidy cut in decades. Plus oil near 4-month low on OPEC Plus supply outlook and U.S. stocks. The program is Business Express, reaching you from Abuja, Nigeria's capital. I am Musa Abubakar, your guide. Well, let's begin by telling you that the Minister of Finance and Coordinating Minister of the Economy, Wale Edun, has on Tuesday submitted the Accelerated Stabilization and Advancement Plan to President Bola Tinubu in his office. The plan, which is a cross-government response to stabilizing the Nigerian economy and reposition it towards a higher growth trajectory, was developed by the EMT Emergency Task Force. The EMT Emergency Task Force comprised of participants from the federal government, state governments and the private sector. A draft copy of the plan presented to the president with an accompanying executive order to bolster the plan gave an insight into how the administration seeks to address some of the many problems which seem to be trying to torpedo its reforms, among others. Meanwhile, President Bola Tinubu has directed the Minister of Finance, Wale Edun, to come up with cost implications of the new minimum wage and present an affordable, sustainable and realistic figure within 2 days. Minister of Information and National Orientation, Mohammed Idris, made this known at the State House of Abuja after a closed-door meeting with the President, government representatives and organized labor concerning the minimum wage negotiation. This was as Nigeria Labour Congress and Trade Union Congress announced they had relaxed the indefinite strike action, which began on Monday for 1 week to allow progress in talks. The announcement of the suspension of the strike, which came after an emergency National Executive Council meeting of the two bodies, urged all affiliate unions and state councils to return to their respective workplaces immediately, while the negotiation team follows up on the government's promise to increase the proposed 60,000 national minimum wage. They said the reprieve was to allow the federal government to commit to an acceptable national minimum wage, take definitive steps to reverse the electricity tariff hike back to 65 naira to a kilowatt per hour of electricity, and abolish the discriminatory classification of electricity consumers into bands. The Central Bank of Nigeria and the West African Institute of Financial and Economic Management, WIFM, are partnering with multilateral organizations to strengthen debt management capacity in West Africa. To this end, a regional training on annual borrowing plan development is organized for WIFM member countries as part of efforts towards ensuring prudent fiscal management and economic stability.
Formulate and update MTDS, the practical implementation often presents considerable challenges. This particular training on annual borrowing plan development is designed to address this issue by providing a structured framework for operationalizing the MTDS annually.
The ABP enables debt managers to optimize the timing and structure of debt issuance by carefully analyzing market conditions and investor preferences and the government's borrowing needs. This strategic approach can lower borrowing costs and reduce the overall economic debt burden.
Meanwhile, the Central Bank of Nigeria has denied allegations that it plans to revoke the licenses of 3 additional banks following the recent revocation of Heritage Bank's license. In a statement signed by Hakama Sidi Ali, the acting director of communications, the Nigerian financial system says the Nigerian financial system remains safe, sound and resilient. The banking regulator noted that banks have begun submitting implementation plans for the banking sector recapitalization program in compliance with the circular reviewing minimum capital requirements for commercial, merchant and non-interest banks. CBN stated that it will increase the financial system's contribution to the growth and development of 1 trillion US dollar Nigerian economy. The CBN would like to reassure all stakeholders of its unwavering commitment to ensuring the financial system's stability. Our financial system remains on a solid footing, and as a regulator will continue to take all necessary steps to maintain its safety and soundness. It will be recalled that on Monday, June 3rd, 2024, the Central Bank of Nigeria revoked Heritage Bank's license and appointed National Deposit Insurance Corporation as the liquidator. Now, the Central Bank of Nigeria's revocation of Heritage Bank's operating license has sent shockwaves throughout the financial industry, leaving depositors, investors and stakeholders wondering about the implications. The CBN cites breaches of financial regulations and poor financial performance as reasons for the revocation. But what does this mean for the bank's customers, employees and the broader financial landscape? Joining me now is Professor Uche Owaluke, financial economist and Director, Institute of Capital Market Studies at Nasarawa State University, Cafe, to help us understand the implications of this development and what it means for Nigeria's financial sector. Professor, you're welcome to Business Express.
Thanks so much, Musa. My pleasure indeed.
I think before we start this conversation, it's very important that we have some sort of a kind of background. Let's see this report and to tell you that we've been around this particular issue, I think 3 weeks earlier before it actually happened. Let's see the report.
This morning, I need money. I go to my main branch in Zone 3, Rochas Plaza. I met people there. The branch is shut down. I went to Zone 5 near First Bank. I went there. Security are telling me they are not more operated. I said, why? They said I should come to shop rice. That's why I come down here. I come down here. I meet people not paying. They said the network is shut down.
I'm not giving a concrete reason why the problem is all about. They are telling us that the network is down, and the network has been like this for more than 3 months. It's not going through. You cannot transfer, you cannot withdraw, you cannot use ATM. You cannot get access to your money. When you come to the branch, for you to get cash, they will be giving you peanuts.
Monday, just to transfer 450,000, I couldn't get it. Withdraw money, I couldn't get it. I tried my best to see the manager yesterday. He promised me that my transfer would be done by the end of work yesterday. I've not seen the alert. But within the week, on Monday, a woman came here and was shouting. They were begging her to collect.
Well, Prof, as you can see, well, that's the views of some of the bank customers. That was like 3 weeks before the CBN decided to revoke the license of the bank. What do you make of all this, this recent development by the CBN?
Well, Musa, Let me start by saying that the banking sector is a very, very highly sensitive sector, and it is one sector that thrives on public trust, public confidence. So it's important that that trust is maintained at all times. And that is why, in my view, what the central bank has done is in the interest of financial system stability, and is in the overall public interest. So I think it's one move that will engender trust, that will also send the signal out there, especially to the banks, that they must sit up, especially in terms of corporate governance, in terms of eschewing reckless lending, and also playing by the rules. I think that is what this action has, one message that the central bank has sent out there.
Okay, how do you think this development will affect depositors and customers of Heritage Bank?
Well, of course, it's in line with the powers of the bank to start with. If you look at the CBN Act of 2007, Section 2 of the Act spells out the objects of the bank. 5 objects are listed under Section 2. Of course, the first is to maintain monetary and price stability, to issue legal tender. Number 3 says to maintain external reserves. And then number 4 is to ensure the soundness of the financial system. And of course, number 5 is to advise the government and act as banker to the government. But the important one here we are talking about is to maintain the financial, soundness of the entire, financial system. So, and that is important. And if you take this section alongside with Section 12, subsection 1 of the Bofia Act of 2020, that's the Banks and Other Financial Institutions Act of 2020, it also spells out some conditions that must be met before the central bank can revoke the license of a bank. Now, some of them, the major ones there you find are, number 1, when the assets of the bank are insufficient to meet the liabilities. In other words, the bank has now negative share capital. And of course, when the central bank, has reasons to believe that the bank is critically undercapitalized, and that the capital adequacy ratio is below the minimum, specified, minimum prudential ratio that is specified. In this instance, it's 10%. And then, of course, when the central bank thinks that the situation of the bank is a threat to financial stability. So if you take all this together, you will now come to agree that the depositors, don't have any reason to fear, because what the central bank has done is in their interest. So the central bank has now appointed NDIC, of course, again in line with Section 12, to act as liquidator. And what that section says is that once that appointment has been made, the NDIC will be deemed to have been appointed by the Federal High Court, to now act as a liquidator in line with the CAMA. Okay, so that's what that act says. So the NDIC will now ensure that the depositors of funds in Heritage Bank get their, recover their deposits, at least to the maximum amount insured.
Now, Prof, there's this growing concern, because we've seen this, almost the same thing happen to Sky Bank, which it's somehow, today we are seeing the emergence of Keystone and I think, and Polaris, I think. The question is, why is the CBN now, why did the CBN decided to allow this particular bank to reach this level of failure before they now act? And then isn't there a willing buyer? A willing buyer?
Yeah, thanks for that question. I have been asked that question a number of times, and my answer is, you see, it depends on the severity of the problem. Okay, we have about 5 different types of bank failure resolution options. Okay, when a bank is failing, of course, the central bank can apply, what is called open bank assistance or financial assistance. Okay, either by way of direct lending or by way of guaranteeing loans made by the bank. Okay, a bank can also receive, as one of the resolution options, technical assistance. In that case, you expect the central bank to change the management of the bank, to ensure that the bank is well run. And there's also the third option, which is the purchase and assumption option, where a healthy bank now comes to buy over acquire the assets of the bank and assume the liabilities, including the deposits of the bank.
Okay.
And then there is the bridge
I'm
option.
Afraid there's a new development.
The final point I want to make is...
No, we'll still continue the conversation.
Okay.
Well, there's a new development. Well, it seems like it's time to hand over to Sokoto for live telecast. Okay. Well, it seems like we should, continue the conversation.
Okay, I should finish my point. Okay, I was talking about the resolution options. You were asking why wait opt-in, and I'm saying that it does appear that the central bank, has tried all the options, and what appears to be the best option now is that liquidation. Because I was talking about the steps, the various options. I talked about financial assistance, I talked about technical assistance, I talked about purchase and assumption. The other option is the bridge back option. Okay, we saw that in the case of, remember, AfriBank later had Mainstream Bank as the bridge bank. Okay, that of course later became was acquired by Sky, and then Sky eventually by Polaris. And we also had the case of Bank PHB. The bridge bank there in that case was the current Keystone Bank, and the case of Spring Bank again metamorphosed into Enterprise Bank that was also eventually acquired by this same Heritage Bank in 2014. So there's the bridge bank option. Bridge bank is simply a temporary institution or a temporary bank that will manage the assets and liabilities of the bank until a buyer is found. So the last option, okay, which is the extreme form of it, is the liquidation option. All right, and that is usually adopted when the central bank has tried these other options and nothing seems to be working. If you look at that circular released by the central bank, it says there that the Heritage Bank has no reasonable, reasonable prospects of recovery, to attempt to quote that statement, has no reasonable prospects of recovery. So that will tell you that they have tried everything to resuscitate the bank, okay, but what will appear feasible now is this idea of liquidation. And they also said in that circular that they even prescribed a number of supervisory steps, to the bank in order to salvage the situation. But of course, all of that, didn't work out, which is why the central bank now decided to toe this line of action, which I said earlier on, is in line with, public interest.
Now the NDIC now steps in to say, okay, 5 million is the maximum statutory insurance payout.
Yes. And
the rest of depositors' funds after is promised after liquidation.
Yeah.
There are depositors that have, like I've seen one is 17 million on social media.
Yeah, but there are not many.
Or things like that. Yes, because the DIC earlier today during briefing said that I think about
98.9%.
More than 90% of the customers have less than 5 million. 5 million funds in their accounts. So now the CBN is saying that the banks are sound and resilient and things like that. What's the possibility that this won't happen again?
And now you have, of course, you also saw the recent reaction by the central bank, and I'm happy central bank, promptly responded to the, false rumor that was going around with respect to 3 banks, because as I said, it's important that public trust, public confidence be maintained in our banking sector. So when that rumor was flying around, the central bank, quickly, swung into action and brought out the correct version and said our banks are safe. And how do you know that? How do you confirm that? It's by looking at the prudential ratios, okay, whether in terms of non-performing loans or capital adequacy ratio or even liquidity ratio. If you look at the average for the industry, you'll find that they are all within thresholds, okay? Take non-performing loans, for example. The threshold is 5% maximum. And we understand for our banks today, the average is about 4.6%. If you look at liquidity ratio, threshold is 30% minimum. Our banks all have well over 30%. And for capital adequacy ratio, between 10% and 15%, we also have, this ratio in the average of 13.5%. So the banking system today is stable, is safe, and sound. No doubt about that. So it is important that rumors about the financial sector, the banking sector in particular, we take them with caution. And that's because of the sensitivity of that sector. Look at that rumor yesterday and how it suddenly affected the share price of one of the banks that was mentioned, because the other two are not listed. But one of them is a listed company, a listed bank on the exchange, and it affected the share price of that, that bank. So, as I said, I'm happy that the central bank responded to avoid a situation in which people begin to, panic, and then you find us, the banks now experiencing what we call a run. A run on the banks, of course, is something that can destabilize the financial system. And I'm happy that the central bank, by this action, is on top of it. Okay. So what is important is that the depositors will get their funds.
Okay, thank you.
Maximum of 5 million naira.
I'm a very weak.
And anybody in excess of that will get, later by way of liquidation.
Thank you very much, Professor Uche Waleke. Well, it's now time to hand over to Sokoto Network Center, where a telecast on distribution of motorcycle is going on there.